For more than 1,000 years, the British monarchy has stood as a living thread through history. It has witnessed invasions, civil wars, religious revolutions, world wars, and the rise and fall of empires. Kings and queens have worn the crown, some heroic, some tyrannical, some deeply controversial. Yet through it all, the monarchy has endured, constantly reinventing itself to survive. Today, it is both a symbol of tradition and a question for the future. This is the full story of the British monarchy from 871 to 2025. Our story begins in 871, when Alfred the Great of Wessex took the throne during a time of chaos. Viking invasions had ravaged the land. Kingdoms fell one by one, and England as a single nation did not yet exist. Alfred defended his people with courage and vision, reforming the military, building fortified towns known as Buzz, and even promoting education and law. He earned the title, the Great, not simply for his victories, but because he planted the first seeds of a united English identity. After Alfred, his descendants, especially King Athelstan, carried this vision forward. By the early 10th century, Athelstan became the first king to truly rule all of England. But the unity was fragile. Viking raids persisted, and rival claimants vied for the crown. The monarchy of this period was one of resilience. Kings had to fight to survive and prove their legitimacy in battle. The era closed with Edward the Confessor, a pious king whose death in 1066 without an heir sparked a crisis that would forever alter English history. Three men claimed the throne: Harold Godwin's son, Harold Hardrada of Norway, and William of Normandy. The clash that followed would reshape the monarchy itself. The year 1066 is etched into the English imagination. Harold Godwinson's army defeated Harold Hardrada at Stamford Bridge, but just weeks later, he faced William of Normandy at Hastings. After a brutal battle, Harold was slain, and William became William the Conqueror. The Norman Conquest did not just change rulers, it transformed England. The Normans introduced a rigid feudal system, placing loyalty to the king at the heart of society. Castles dotted the countryside, symbols of Norman dominance. The Domesday Book of 1086 recorded every field, every village, every piece of wealth, a monumental display of royal authority. But Norman rule was not uncontested. Rebellions flared across the land, with Anglo-Saxon nobles and northern rebels resisting. The monarchy proved its power through sheer force, stamping out opposition. From this point forward, England would never be the same. The crown had become not just a symbol of leadership, but of absolute control. In 1154, the Plantagenets took the throne with Henry II. His reign was marked by reform and conflict. Henry revolutionized royal justice, creating the foundations of English common law, a system still felt today. Yet his bitter feud with Archbishop Thomas Becket ended in murder inside Canterbury Cathedral, staining his legacy. The Plantagenets gave England some of its most famous and infamous rulers. Richard the Lionheart, who spent much of his reign abroad fighting in the Crusades, became a legend of chivalry. His brother, King John, by contrast, faced baronial rebellion and was forced to sign the Magna Carta in 1215. This charter limited royal authority for the first time, laying the groundwork for parliamentary power. Later Plantagenet kings waged the 100 Years' War against France, with victories at Crécy and Agincourt becoming national legends. But the dynasty's end came with civil war at home, the Wars of the Roses. For 30 years, rival branches of the family, Lancaster and York, fought for the crown. In 1485, at Bosworth Field, Henry Tudor defeated Richard III, the last Plantagenet king. A new royal house rose, born from bloodshed. The Tudors rose to power after the bloody Wars of the Roses, with Henry VII seizing the throne in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth. His victory ended decades of civil conflict and established a dynasty built on careful diplomacy, strategic marriages, and financial stability. Yet it was his son, Henry VIII, who would dominate the Tudor story with ambition and controversy. Desperate for a male heir, Henry broke with the Pope, establishing the Church of England and triggering the English Reformation. His 6 marriages, his brutal treatment of dissenters, and his dissolution of monasteries permanently altered both religion and politics in England. The turbulence of Henry's reign left deep scars, but it also laid the foundations for a stronger, centralized monarchy. His daughter Mary I sought to restore Catholicism, earning the grim title Bloody Mary for her persecution of Protestants. But her death without children opened the way for her half-sister, Elizabeth I. Under Elizabeth, England flourished. She proved a shrewd and charismatic ruler, balancing threats from abroad with religious tensions at home. The defeat of the mighty Spanish Armada in 1588 marked England's emergence as a serious naval power, and her reign became known as a golden age. Elizabeth's era was not only about politics and war, but also culture and discovery. Explorers like Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh carried English influence across the seas, while playwrights such as William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe transformed literature and theater. The Queen's image, the Virgin Queen, became a powerful symbol of national identity, uniting her people in pride and defiance. Yet despite her achievements, Elizabeth left no heir when she died in 1603. The Tudor dynasty, which had begun in triumph and reshaped England through war, religion, and culture, came to an end. The crown passed to the Stuarts, who would inherit not just the throne, but also the growing conflicts between monarch and parliament that the Tudors had only just managed to contain. James VI of Scotland inherited the English crown as James I, uniting the crowns of Scotland and England. But the Stuarts believed in the divine right of kings, which clashed with Parliament's growing power. Under Charles I, tensions erupted into civil war in 1642. Royalists and parliamentarians fought bitterly, dividing families and communities. By 1649, Charles I was captured and executed, the first king in English history to be publicly tried and killed by his own people. For a decade, England became a republic under Oliver Cromwell. But the monarchy returned in 1660 with Charles II, remembered as the Merry Monarch. His reign restored stability, but could not erase the underlying struggle between crown and parliament. The final Stuart crisis came in 1688, when James II was deposed in the Glorious Revolution. William of Orange and Mary II ruled jointly, but under conditions set by Parliament. The 1689 Bill of Rights permanently limited royal power, ensuring the monarchy would never again be absolute. With the death of Queen and in 1714, the crown passed to the House of Hanover, a German dynasty with little connection to Britain. George I, who spoke almost no English, depended heavily on his ministers to govern. This dynamic paved the way for the rise of the Prime Minister, with Sir Robert Walpole often regarded as the first to hold that role. From this point, the monarchy began its gradual shift away from absolute power, as Parliament asserted itself as the true political authority. George II and George III witnessed both Britain's greatest expansions and one of its deepest wounds. The 7 Years' War brought vast overseas gains, securing Canada and India as part of Britain's growing empire. Yet George III's reign was scarred by the loss of the American colonies after the Revolution of 1776. For many, this was a humiliation that exposed the limits of imperial power, though Britain soon recovered by consolidating influence elsewhere across the globe. By the time of George IV and William IV, the monarchy's role had become more ceremonial than political. Scandals, extravagance, and questions of competence further weakened royal authority, while Parliament passed sweeping reforms that reshaped Britain's political system. The Hanoverians had presided over both empire and upheaval, but by 1837 the stage was prepared for a new era of monarchy, one that would be defined by Queen Victoria, whose reign would surpass them all in length and influence. Queen Victoria's reign defined the Victorian Age, lasting an extraordinary 63 years and shaping the identity of Britain itself. She embodied an image of morality, duty, and family, becoming a symbol of national stability. Known as the grandmother of Europe, her children and grandchildren married into nearly every major royal house, weaving Britain into the dynastic fabric of the continent. During her reign, Britain stood at the very height of its imperial power. The empire stretched across vast continents, with India proclaimed the jewel in the crown. Colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific reinforced Britain's global dominance, while the Royal Navy maintained control of the seas. At home, the Industrial Revolution transformed daily life. Railways connected distant cities, factories reshaped labor, and London became the beating heart of a rapidly modernizing world. But the grandeur of empire was mirrored by profound personal sorrow. Victoria's marriage to Prince Albert had been one of deep devotion, and his untimely death in 1861 shattered her. For the rest of her life, she dressed in black mourning clothes, withdrawing from much of public life. This human vulnerability softened her image, revealing a monarch who carried immense personal grief even as she symbolized national strength. When Queen Victoria died in 1901, her passing marked the end of an age. The monarchy stood at the peak of prestige and power, its influence spanning continents and cultures. Yet the dawn of the 20th century would bring challenges she could never have foreseen: wars, revolutions, and social upheavals that would test whether the monarchy she had fortified could truly endure. Victoria's son, Edward VII, brought a new style to the monarchy, more cosmopolitan and outward-looking. His reign lasted only 9 years, but he helped modernize the crown. His son, George V, faced the immense challenge of World War I. Anti-German sentiment led him to change the family name from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to Windsor in 1917, a name that remains to this day. The interwar period brought economic depression and social upheaval. Then came the abdication crisis of 1936. Edward VIII gave up the crown to Mary Wallace Simpson, an American divorcee. For the first time in history, love outweighed duty, and the monarchy was shaken. His brother became George VI, taking on the burden of kingship in a time of looming war. George VI became the steady hand of Britain during its darkest years. When World War II engulfed Europe, he chose to remain in London with his people, even as the Blitz reduced whole neighborhoods to rubble. His radio broadcasts carried into homes across the nation, offering words of courage and resilience. Alongside Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, he visited bombed-out streets, hospitals, and troops, becoming a living symbol of endurance when Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. But victory in war could not preserve the empire. In 1947, India's independence signaled the beginning of the great unraveling of Britain's colonial rule, and other dominions soon followed. At home, rationing, rebuilding, and social reform reshaped the nation. By the time George VI died in 1952, the monarchy was respected but facing a very different world, one in which his young daughter, Elizabeth, would inherit both the crown and the challenge of redefining kingship in a modern age. Elizabeth II ascended the throne in 1952, just 25 years old, inheriting a world still scarred by the devastation of the Second World War. Her coronation the following year became a defining moment, as millions watched the ceremony on television for the very first time. What had once been a private ritual of kings and queens became a shared national and global event, ushering in a new media age where the monarchy would exist under constant public scrutiny. Her reign unfolded during a century of profound transformation. The British Empire, once the most powerful in the world, gradually dissolved as colonies across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean declared independence. Yet from this decline emerged the Commonwealth of Nations, where Elizabeth positioned herself as a unifying figurehead rather than an imperial ruler. At home, Britain experienced immense social and cultural change. The optimism of the post-war years, the radical spirit of the 1960s, economic challenges in the 1970s, and the rise of modern consumer culture. Through it all, the Queen remained a steady, apolitical presence, offering continuity in a shifting world. But her reign was not without turbulence. The monarchy itself became a source of drama and controversy, most notably in the troubled marriage of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer. Their bitter separation and eventual divorce played out under the glare of the global press. The tragic death of Princess Diana in 1997 plunged the monarchy into crisis, as public anger flared over the royal family's apparent detachment. For the first time, the crown's survival seemed uncertain, but Elizabeth adapted, addressing her people directly and gradually restoring trust in the institution. Despite these challenges, Elizabeth's resilience was celebrated time and again through her jubilees. The Silver Jubilee in 1977, the Golden Jubilee in 2002, the Diamond Jubilee in 2012, and the Platinum Jubilee in 2022 were more than milestones of longevity. They were reaffirmations of the monarchy's ability to endure. Millions gathered in streets and around televisions to honor her, turning these events into national rituals that strengthened the bond between monarch and people. By the time of her death in September 2022, Elizabeth II had become much more than a queen. She was a global figure, a symbol of duty, continuity, and stability across 7 decades of breathtaking change. Having reigned longer than any British monarch in history, she bridged the age of empire with the digital age, meeting every prime minister from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss. Her passing marked not just the end of her reign, but the closing of an era, leaving a legacy of constancy in a century defined by upheaval. In 2022, history turned a new page with the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning monarch in British history. Her passing marked the end of a remarkable era and the beginning of her son's reign, King Charles III. At 73, Charles ascended the throne, making him the oldest monarch to take the crown in British history. His reign has begun during a period of immense global uncertainty. The world today faces climate change, economic instability, shifting geopolitics, and deep social divides. The United Kingdom itself grapples with inflation, debates over national identity after Brexit, and renewed calls for independence in Scotland and Northern Ireland. The monarchy, once seen as an untouchable pillar of tradition, is now being questioned more openly than ever before. Yet, Charles III is not without vision. For decades, he was often dismissed as eccentric, but his lifelong advocacy for environmental sustainability, organic farming, and conservation now places him in step with global priorities. Many see him as a monarch who could bring relevance to the crown by aligning it with the pressing issues of the 21st century. Still, there are challenges he cannot ignore. Public opinion is divided. Some admire the monarchy's sense of continuity and national unity, while others criticize it as outdated, elitist, and disconnected from modern democratic ideals. Younger generations in particular, shaped by rapid social change and digital culture, question whether the monarchy has a place in their future at all. The symbolism of the crown remains powerful. Royal ceremonies still draw millions of viewers worldwide, and Charles's coronation in 2023 was both a global spectacle and a moment of reflection. Yet the whispers continue. What happens after Charles? His son, Prince William, enjoys broader popularity, seen as a figure who might modernize the monarchy further. As of 2025, the British monarchy endures, as it has for more than 1,000 years. But its future is far from guaranteed. Will it evolve into a streamlined, more transparent institution? Or will rising discontent, economic pressures, and calls for equality eventually erode its foundations? The crown has survived wars, revolutions, and centuries of upheaval. But in today's rapidly changing world, its survival depends not on tradition alone, but on its ability to reinvent itself for a new generation. From Alfred the Great to Charles III, the British monarchy has been at the center of wars, revolutions, triumphs, and tragedies. It has redefined itself countless times to endure. Whether it lasts another 1,000 years or fades into memory, its story remains one of the greatest in history. This is not just the tale of crowns and castles. It is the story of a nation itself.